Welcome to Cisco HyperFlex video series. This is regular cluster installation. When you have your HyperFlex servers racked and stacked, all the VLANs and addressing chosen, and the UCS domain configured, it is time to proceed with the HyperFlex installation. In our case, we will be using a flatter infrastructure design than usual. In most cases, the out-of-band management VLANs and the in-band management VLAN would be separate and would use different subnets. The common infrastructure would be behind a router on its own segment and would be shared with other data center services. Since we are deploying our cluster in a lab environment, we are using one layer 2 network for all our management purposes. To install the HyperFlex data platform, we will first have to choose the version to install. The information you need to make this decision is available directly on the Cisco software download site, where you can obtain the HyperFlex installer. The recommended version is marked with a star, and all the components for that version are listed here, as well as the related software. Here you can find the custom vSphere hypervisor, with which you can reinstall the hypervisor on your HyperFlex nodes or upgrade it after installation, and version upgrade packages for the HyperFlex data platform and its infrastructure. This can save you time when you are looking for the currently recommended list of software and firmware versions, but a lot more information can be found in the HyperFlex pre-installation checklist. Here you can find a more detailed breakdown of release compatibility and network requirements, like ports and network service requirements. You should always consult this document when planning a deployment. This is why there is also an editable PDF version available for download, which you can fill out with the required information. After you have decided on the HyperFlex version, and after checking the pre-installation checklist for a given HyperFlex deployment, you can consult the HyperFlex installation guide for a detailed guide to installing HyperFlex. We have decided to follow the latest recommended version. We have also deployed a vCenter installation compatible with our hypervisors outside our cluster, and configured a Windows Server installation to provide DNS and NTP services to the cluster. We now deploy the installer as an OVA and connect to it using HTTP access. We provide the username and password for the HX installer, and we are presented with the option to either expand or install a cluster. We can install different flavors of HyperFlex through the same installer. Since we will be installing a regular cluster, we select the regular cluster workflow. In the first step of the installer, we provide the credentials of the management platforms the installer will configure for us: the UCS Manager for the hardware management, vCenter for the hypervisor management, and we also provide the hypervisor credentials so that the installer can add the hypervisors running on the nodes into the vCenter and make the configuration options we choose for us. For our installation, we will use a pre-prepared JSON file. JSON is a plain text configuration format, so we will not have to enter the values manually. This JSON file was exported from a previous 4-server installation. We will still need to provide passwords, since they are not stored in the JSON. In the next step, you can see the list of unassociated servers. If any servers would already exist in the UCS domain, they would be listed under Associated Servers tab. To define the server ports, we could run the UCS Manager here, or just provide the port numbers where we connected the servers. You provide the values for Fabric A or B, slot on individual Fabric interconnect, and the port number. We will be using 17 to 21, since these are the first 5 QSFP Plus ports on our Fabric interconnects. In the UCSM configuration step, we provide VLANs for each of the HyperFlex networks. Only in-band management and VM networks need access beyond the top-of-rack switches, But if you wanted to migrate VMs to your new HyperFlex installation from a previous vSphere environment, you would also allow the vMotion network upstream from the top-of-rack switches. Here we also select a unique MAC prefix to be assigned to virtualized interfaces of VIX. The MAC prefix must be unique, or the assigned MAC addresses might overlap at some point as they are dynamically assigned. And we also provide out-of-band management addresses for direct CIMC access. These addresses allow you to connect to the individual server managed by the UCS manager. And we will choose the appropriate firmware version to use for the servers and infrastructure. Updating the device firmware takes a long time, so it is better to update the firmware ahead of time. In the next step, we provide the IP addressing to be configured on the hypervisors and the host names to be used. This will be configured automatically by the HyperFlex install wizard through serial over Ethernet connection. In the following step, we add the hypervisor and CVM addresses in the data VLAN, where the hypervisors communicate with CVMs to perform reads and writes on the HyperFlex shared data platform. We also provide CVM IP addresses in Management VLAN and the HyperFlex cluster IP address where the HyperFlex Connect will be accessible. Finally, we choose the name of the cluster and its replication factor, which defines the cluster resilience. This cannot be changed after installation, so it is crucial to choose wisely here. The recommended option is RF3, so we will go with that. We will choose a password to be configured on the CVM and name the data center and cluster as they will be seen in the vCenter. Here we provide the DNS address. DNS is recommended on vSphere installation, but it is not mandatory, and NTP, which is mandatory in any HyperFlex installation. We choose the time zone and finally, under Advanced, check that jumbo frames are enabled, which is the default. And since we are reinstalling the HyperFlex, not doing an install on a fresh set of servers, we also check the Clean Partitions option. We would not choose this on newly purchased servers. And now we start the installation. In validation step, the installer checks the QoS settings, firmware versions, and other hardware-related settings. In UCS Manager configuration, the installer configures the UCS Manager service profiles with MAC and IP pools and hardware configurations. The hypervisor configuration step configures the ESXi host through the serial over LAN connection. The deploy validation checks IP reachability within VLANs for all components and DNS resolution. Deploy configures the controller virtual machines and prepares the HX data platform configuration. The installation validation check performs the final OS and firmware check. Cluster creation finally performs the HX data platform installation. After installer finishes, we get a summary report where you can see that the cluster is online and healthy. In our case, it took about an hour to install the 5 servers. This can vary depending on the tasks the installer needs to take, like upgrading firmware. We can confirm the installation in the HX Connect. Here we see a 5-node cluster, online and healthy. As the final step, we can now configure HADRS and vMotion network on the hypervisors by connecting to the installer VM and issuing the post-install command. Here we enable the features we want and provide the vMotion addressing to be used. So here we go. This is now our fully functional cluster of 5 nodes, which we have installed. The hardware and software was automatically configured for us. We have additionally enabled vMotion interfaces for HA and DRS. We can now create a data store and deploy virtual machines on it. This was regular cluster installation. Thank you for watching.